As people are making their way in, I'm going to go ahead and begin the program because we are recording and streaming tonight for a lot of our viewers who will want to look at this a little later or who may be doing Facebook Live. So, good evening. Welcome to the Hall of State. The Dallas Historical Society is home since 1938. We're thrilled to have you here this evening for our program, Stories of Dallas. Have you heard the news? The program is a collaboration with our friends at Deep Vellum Books, and you will find some of their books on sale in the lobby, and generously supported by the Moody Fund for the Arts. We're excited to be welcoming to the stage tonight people I have an enormous amount of respect for. People who have valuable insights into the publications that serve the underrepresented and the marginalized, as well as the mainstream media's representation of various groups. In summary, they have seen and heard a lot, and they have vast experience. We all see the world through our own lens, our own culture, and our own life experience. And fortunately, over the years, that has led to the creation of multiple media outlets that provide a voice for different populations and provide a resource to those populations. And our country is better for having representation for all. And coincidentally, March 16th, 1827, March 16th, this very day, the first black newspaper, Freedom's Journal, was published in New York City. Yes, I think that deserves a round of applause. And newspapers aren't just important to us historically. They are critical to our future. This is a particularly important time to be talking about the news. Now more than ever, journalism and news are lifelines to democracy. They speak of and to our communities and are the guardians of facts. This evening, we will start with a presentation by Dr. Melita Garza. I'm going to read through all their bios before they approach the stage. Dr. Garza is Associate Professor of Journalism at TCU's Bob Schieffer College of Communication. After the presentation, we will transition to our moderator panel for discussion. Our speakers and panelists are unique in their experiences. Dr. Melita Garza is an American journalism historian who studies news as an agent of democracy, specializing in English and Spanish language news, the immigrant press, and coverage of underrepresented groups. She is the author of the award-winning They Came to Toil, the newspaper representations of Mexicans and immigrants in the Great Depression, University of Texas Press, 2018. She holds a PhD from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, an MBA from the University of Chicago, and an AB from Harvard College. She spent 2 decades reporting for the Chicago Tribune, Bloomberg News, and the LA Times. She teaches journalism, history, business journalism, diversity in the media, and honors college. Our moderator for tonight, Norma Adams Wade, was hired by the Dallas Morning News in 1974. She was the first black full-time staff writer, and I'm going to let her give you the ins and outs of that when she's on stage, following a black columnist hired in 1967. Wade covered general assignments, federal courts, consumer affairs, and helped create and staff the Metro South Bureau. In January 1988, she added writing a column to her reporting duties, and she retired in December 2002, but continues to write her column about local Black leaders and issues. She is the founder of the National Association of Black Journalists. Her awards include Lifetime Achievement from NABJ's Dallas-Fort Worth affiliate, and the News's own Joe Dealey Publishers Award for outstanding reporting. We are also joined by two men tonight who know the challenges of publishing a newspaper and engaging those marginalized communities. Patrick Washington is publisher and CEO of the Dallas Weekly. Continuously published without missing a single issue for more than 65 years, DW has emerged as one of the most trusted voices of the African American community in North Texas. Patrick is the second generation of his family to publish the Weekly. He's the son of an entrepreneur and an artist, and he has used his life experience and education in filmmaking to create a more contemporary media outlet. DW has been recognized and awarded for its impactful journalism locally, statewide, regionally, and nationally, more than any other Black-owned media enterprise of its kind in the area. Last but not least, Robert Moore. Moore co-founded the Dallas Voice, the LGBTQ-focused weekly newspaper, in 1984. After working for 2 years at the Dallas Gay News, Moore founded the paper with Don Ritz and William Marbury. They each invested $250 and began to publish the paper out of a small office in Oak Lawn. The paper continues to thrive and provide news, life, and style information to the LGBTQ community in Texas. The paper's print circulation, currently in 5 Texas counties, has a weekly readership of 50,000. Physical issues of the Dallas Voice are archived in the Special Collections Department of the University of North Texas. And I would say before I welcome Dr. Garza to the stage, you will find 3 copies in the lobby of Dallas Express, a historic Black newspaper in Dallas. Those actually are in the collections of the African American Museum, and they have loaned them. I urge you to take a look at them. They're very insightful. So anyway, without further ado, Dr. Melita Garza.
I'm honored to be with such a distinguished panel and to be with all of you today. I'm going to briefly set the scene for some context for what we're, back we go, to the discussion today. And so clearly I want to state that I do have a point of view on this, and that is that this is not about alternative news. We're not alternative to anyone here, nor are the publications and voices of the people of color who are in journalism today and in the past. So I think it's important to recognize that in classic terms in journalism school, we're taught that news matters because it provides the information that people need to be free to make decisions about how they will be governed. It has a very lofty place in the First Amendment that we're all familiar with. So clearly news is a cornerstone of democracy, of that idea of equal opportunity. But the news hasn't always been democratic, nor is it necessarily democratic today, and I mean democratic with a small d, of course. I can get this to work. So as Vellum mentioned, we are at the 195th anniversary of the first Black newspaper today, March 16th, and 1827. So I think the words here are prophetic. They still are true today. that there are too many who choose or try to speak for people of color, for people of who are not represented in the news well, marginalized communities, so-called. And I think this is seen, clear through line to this. Okay, one more anniversary to note. February was also the anniversary of the founding of the Cherokee Phoenix, the first Native American newspaper. And that was founded amid, I know it will be shocking to learn, land disputes between Native American tribes and the First Amendment. Founded in Georgia, and there was a little to do over the fact that the Indian lands were found to have had gold. So I think we know how this story ends, but nonetheless, Cherokee Phoenix is also notable because it was printed in both Cherokee language and English. Let me get this. Okay, so the through line to John Russwurm and the founders of Freedom Journal is, I think, encapsulated well in this quote from Nicole Hannah-Jones, the founder of the 1619 Project, where she asked the question recently on Twitter, should people writing about racism have some expertise in actual racism? Which is another way of asking the question or stating the idea that too long have people spoken for us. Okay. This is, oops, a little fast here. So back up a second. So I think before we go any further, I want to clarify why this discussion is so important. Why is journalism so important? And you might say, well, as Vellum told us, you spent most of your life being a journalist, so maybe I do have a vested interest in this topic. But I think it's important to realize or recognize that reporters are the chief constructors of historical and contemporary understanding, the so-called first rough draft of history. Journalists interpret, analyze, and frame events, issues, people, places, and by choosing what to cover, how to cover it, what not to cover, journalism helps define what matters and what doesn't matter, and who matters and who doesn't matter. So I think, let me get to the next slide. Here's some examples of some of the iconic and original news organizations, including some that are represented on this panel today. And I think the question is, how can you have a democracy, a word that comes from the Greek word demos, meaning people, if they don't exist in the stories that define our nation? If large swaths of people are not recorded in our news media and haven't been, what does that say about our democracy? There are no alternative people. There is no alternative media. There are different voices and ideas that historically have been considered outside the norm. Many of the people and ideas have since gained broader acceptance through years of press advocacy. The suffragist movement, labor movement, to name just two. That isn't to say that all things are equal for women in society, that all things are equal for Native Americans, and certainly not for other people of color, as we continue to see in our news media and in our world. And this issue of trying to be representative in mainstream news is long. People often turn to the Kerner Commission report. Former governor of Illinois, Otto Kerner, led this commission in the 1960s in the wake of riots and urban unrest. What can be done? And at this point, some news organizations decided to hire their first Black reporters, maybe their first Hispanic reporters. And yet, still, we know that there are not enough voices in mainstream media. But this actually began in 1947 with another commission. And I think one of the things to note is that historically, these voices have been described as underdogs, as somehow less than, and just the idea of alternative. Well, you can have the real thing, or you can have the unreal thing, the alternative thing, when in point of fact, the real thing, the white news, was essentially just that. It was another alternative. They're all alternatives, right? So, as a scholar of media and democracy, my particular area of expertise is the ways English and Spanish language news media have persisted in the making and unmaking of groups of people, of readers, of immigrants and citizens. In my book, They Came to Toil, I examined the othering of Mexicans and immigrants during a period of severe economic strife, focusing on Texas during the Great Depression, in particular focusing on the San Antonio news media, which had 2 English language daily newspapers and 1 Spanish language daily newspaper that was transnational and that circulated throughout the country. So these are competing visions. It's a little bit like maybe reading these newspapers is like Fox News, which would be Hearst, CBS, which would be maybe the Express, San Antonio Express, which is now owned by Hearst, long story, won't go into that. And then La Prensa, which at the time was the foremost exemplar of Spanish language news media in the entire United States. And as an example of what I mean by alternative, the Spanish language newspaper actually was much better written, had much more erudite voices on its editorial pages, renowned scholars and writers from around the world. We really didn't hold a candle to the English language papers, but nonetheless, this is one example from the San Antonio Light that on that previous page, which showed that it gave voice to a lot of the anti-immigrant sentiments, and that previous slide showed a column by then Secretary of Labor William Doak saying that the golden door of immigration had been closed. We did allow all these people from oppressed nations in before, but now there isn't room. And that should sound pretty familiar almost 100 years later. We've also heard a lot recently about changing immigration policies to reflect Canada, which has, in the view of many, a much more select and impressive way of picking out who will come to their country. But this was an idea originated by William Randolph Hearst, a Harvard dropout and a eugenicist who really didn't like people coming here from certain countries, not an uncommon sentiment today. And then he also, surprisingly, not a new idea to round up aliens, not a unique idea to characterize them as criminals, gang members. All of these could be written today, have been written today. And so, and this is the Express. Now the Express had a different point of view. It still typecast immigrants to have a certain role in our society. They would do the labor which natives are not eager. And in another editorial, they even said they were doing the labor that whites would not do. So there is a question, is being from Mexico an ethnicity? Is that a race? But in point of fact, they were not considered white. So, so this is an idea of how the news media typecast a group of people as being utilitarian, as being the workers, as having a certain role in society, needed but circumscribed. And I wanted to leave you with this, well, there's 2 more slides, but with the Light covered a jobless march through downtown San Antonio. And it happened on their watch. They were an afternoon paper at the time. This march started in the morning. And what's telling about this, more than 1,000 people were marching. And if you note this headline over here, 12 Americans unite with Mexicans in March. Now, unless the reporters were running around asking each person for their papers, it's not clear how they knew that the people who had the darker skin were actually Mexicans and who was the American and who was not. And mind you, of course, all of this debate about the role of Mexicans and immigrants was occurring in a city that was founded by Spanish-speaking immigrants and has the name of San Antonio. So it's not clear who the immigrant is, but at least this is a prevalent idea at the time. And then we have La Prensa, right? And here's their banner headline. Already in 1929, on the eve of some of the deepest, darkest periods of the Depression, feeling the attacks on their community and pointing out that the futility of attempting to eliminate Mexicans from a land that was once theirs and from a city founded by Spanish-speaking immigrants. So it's almost 100 years later, and the Spanish-speaking people and their media remain in the United States. So learning about history teaches us that some things change a little bit, but maybe not as much as we would like. And so I thank you, and I'm looking forward to hearing from the other panelists.
Well, hello, everybody. I am the classic moderator. And so we're going to get right on into this. I'm going to begin sort of picking up on the presentation we just heard, the lasting impact of an alternative media representing Dallas's marginalized communities. And I was intrigued by both of those terms, the alternative that was mentioned and the marginalized. Marginalized means that you're on the fringe, you're not really in the mix, you're an outsider. And so let's just kind of go, let's start at the end and go on. So, and you've kind of expressed your feeling about it. But first of all, is there a lasting impact? And with us being considered alternative, on the fringe, outsiders, marginalized, is there going to be a lasting impact? What do you think? And then we'll just go down the line.
A lasting impact of the imprint of being considered marginalized?
No, of our publications in general. Okay, let me say this. Our publications are considered alternative and that we represent marginalized people. So will our publications, our message, our story, will it have a lasting impact?
Well, I think it will, and ideally it will be seen as not, as I mentioned, not alternative and not marginalized. I mean, consider what is the majority in the state of Texas. There is no majority demographically in the state of Texas. There is a plurality, but there is no majority. And the plurality is actually quite close between Hispanics and the white population. And we're seeing tremendous demographic changes that I think will suggest that marginalized is something that can be retired.
Very good, very good. I've kind of given my thought. What do you think, Mr. Washington?
I'm on the same page with Ms. Garza that marginalized is the term that will probably be phased out with some others that are in the mix. But the lasting impact of what we do, I think, won't go away because of it's that double-edged sword of being in a segregated society where if you don't have a voice, you're not allowed to speak, you start speaking to each other, that becomes your voice. And so there always will be some quote-unquote alternative to whatever the mainstream claims to be, and that will have lasting impact because those communities, like was just presented as, have been here, will be here, and that voice will be heard on some level. The impact might be that in years to come, like it has been in the years past, those voices rise to a volume that is able to be heard by people who otherwise wouldn't even think to hear them. And so that marginalized, that alternative becomes just voices. They'll just be dissenting or agreeing opinions about certain topics from perspectives that we all hopefully respect at some level in some time.
And what do you think?
Lasting impact for sure. And I think the best way that I can describe that is to give a little story. And I see Hector came down and sat right down behind me. And before there was a Dallas Gay News, before there was a Dallas Voice, there was a Dallas Gay News. And I was selling ads for the Dallas Gay News, which was primarily club advertising. And I got a call one day from a guy saying, I'm going to run for the city council of Dallas, and I want to put an ad in your paper. And we had never had a political ad before, not one. And he said, I said, okay, that's great. Where can I get a check? And he said, your check is at the, on the 61st floor of the First National Bank building in downtown, and you can go down and pick it up there. So I walked, got on the elevator, went up to the 60th floor, opened the door, and it was the Trust and Annuity Department of the First National Bank of Dallas. A little tiny lady was sitting behind a big oak desk, this beautiful panel, all these wing-back chairs. I went over and she said, may I help you? And I said, yes, I'm here to see Mr. So-and-so. She said, who are you with? And I said, I'm with the Dallas Gay News. And she said, excuse me? I said, I'm with the Dallas Gay News. She sat back in her chair. She said, have a seat over there. I went, I sat in that little chair. She left, and for the next 15, 20 minutes, it was a parade of other little old ladies walking through the lobby looking.
You were on display.
I was on display. The guy came out, he had my check, and he said, I hear there's a live homosexual in the lobby.
Oh, no, no.
He said, sorry about that. I said, it's okay. So for me to see a lasting impact of my community, what's happened in the world, and when I left The Voice, we were waiting on the Supreme Court to issue a ruling to make same-sex marriage legal in all 50 states. I think we had an impact, yes.
So let me go ahead and still continue on that. How do we know? How do we know if we are having this lasting impact? Or I think Washington mentioned about something about could end up talking to each other. But are there signs that we are having an impact, or are we indeed that tree that falls in the forest and nobody hears it so that they don't know whether it fell or not? Let's come back this way. Go ahead and pick up on that. How do we know that we're having an impact?
Well, I'm going to speak to gay and lesbian media. In the beginning, when we first got started, there was no profile of what our readership was. There was no community, really. There was a community, but it was not reflected.
Exactly.
And in the presentation, it was like, what do you cover and how do you cover it?
Mm-hmm.
And at the Dallas Gay News, the gentleman that owned that at the time had a very strong opinion about what should be covered.
Okay.
Entertainment stuff. Stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we would go down and we would take photos at the in June at 110 degrees of the softball league and send them down and have them printed with the photo. And he's like, nobody cares about softball. So we're trying to create a community. There's a softball league. There's a church. There are political groups. There's a garden club. Why can we not talk about all of those people in one place and put them all together? Gay community did not have something like that.
Yeah.
Now it does in every major city. And so coalescing a community into a thriving, organized, visible organism, I think is something that the gay press has had a great deal of contributing for. I mean, that's
Very good. What are your thoughts?
Well, from a historic standpoint, I'd say the evidence would be 195 years of the black press today.
Okay.
Like that might have an impact. And just from a personal level, I am an impact because I saw this thing travel from my father's mentor, who started in 54, died in 85, gave it to him. I'm now doing it. So there's a literal line of succession for me that's the impact.
Right.
3 families being able to sustain and the history of the paper, its institutionalization in the community that it represents. People recognize it, and every 20, 30 years or something like that, when the generations have separated just enough that things can be forgotten, that's when people like me step back in to remind them that this is where, when you go out, and you see this now, it's crazy, when you go out into the world of today's media and everything is fake, there has to be some place you have to trust. And that is the through line of that impact that you were talking about. This has been trusted forever, as long as it's been around, and it is also attached to a almost 200-year legacy of trust that you can, take to the bank. So, in that kind of way.
That's evidence. That is evidence. What do you think?
Well, I agree with everything that's been said. I'll just add a little bit with respect to Spanish language media. The prensa that I focused on in my book, They Came to Toil, was founded in 1913 in San Antonio, Texas. And a few years later, in 1926, La Opinión was founded in Los Angeles by the same publisher, Ignacio Lozano. And that publication is still in business today. San Antonio also is particularly important in the development of Spanish language television. It was the beginnings of Univision were founded there. Spanish language radio started there. Now we have two Spanish language networks, Univision and Telemundo, often leading, a little known fact by many in mainstream news, often leading in major cities in the Nielsen ratings during prime time and during coveted age groups, Spanish language radio as well. I think another way in which we've had an impact is that mainstream media has tried to co-opt us, has tried to copy us. You turn on, especially CNN and to some extent MSNBC, you'll see a number of not only Spanish language broadcasters, people who came from Spanish language broadcasting, for example, Lincoln, I always want to call him Lincoln, but Jose Diaz Balart on MSNBC, but many people from Asian American and black journalists as well. And I think there is growing recognition that we are not alternative people. And I think they are looking to the original founders of Spanish language and the black press and the gay press to provide that insight that they're missing. I think there is some recognition, but there's a long way to go.
I'm going to back up a bit and ask each of us to tell, why did we get into this business? What attracted us? We're going to talk about that, and I'm going to start it off, but I did want to go back to a little bit of what Moore said, and he mentioned that the man at the top at his previous publication had his own view of what is news. And let me just throw that question in right quick. Is that pretty much the way it is, that the person who's at the top seat really does determine the way you cover the news? What is the news? What's your interpretation of that?
In my case, it was.
Okay.
It depends on the publication that you're working for and where you are, for sure. And I think I determined what was appropriate and not appropriate for us to cover at the time that I was publisher.
Yeah.
I was publisher there.
Yeah.
So I had to make that a point. And press Norma's mic.
Oh, you mean as loud as I talk, you're not hearing me? Okay, press Norma's mic.
No, we're going to take yours.
You take yours. You get that one.
All right. I got it.
Hey,
There we go.
let's don't. We're stopping.
Yes, so the guy at the top is going to determine it, and I think especially in small publications where you have a publisher who's deciding what you're going to put your resources into and where you're going to spend the money and who's going to go out and work and what you can afford to cover, all of that, certainly they do it at the top. And when we started, we decided that we wanted to cover politics. We had to cover politics. We were really the first publication in Texas that gave a lot of resources to politics. And when we were trying to create a community, we had organizations that were issuing candidate endorsements, but only their members knew about it. And so what good is that? So we tried to fill that role of being the voice piece for gay and lesbian organizations that were involved in the trenches and trying to educate people. We wanted to do that. So we made the decision, certainly, we were at the top, and we decided what to cover.
Washington, what?
Yeah. And it's coming from the black press perspective, usually, and this is kind of sad, but that voice might even die with that publisher dying, because we usually die with this thing. And it might change drastically with the next generation. There hasn't been too much of that in our paper, but she had up there, I think, William Randolph Hearst, right? And I mean, yeah, he created the news quite literally whenever he felt like it. And there have been folks like that, and if you have a big enough platform, I mean, everybody here has seen some crazy ranter on social media speaking truth that has millions of people saying that's the truth, and it's like, obvious it's not, but that's their reality. The shaping of reality, which I like that quote too, is like the shaping of reality is like a journalist's job, and reality is subjective in these days, and it always has been. And the person who publishes that thing can cut stories, can take things out, can not put certain information in. The writers can lean into certain narratives or stereotypes to frame certain things, So it's a sensitive thing, and I think that's why, we need to take it seriously. And that's why I think that even the framers of a country that, owned slaves could tell you that it's important that people be able to speak their mind. Let's say, except for those people,
And speak their mind, and we're talking about journalism is supposed to be about truth, but here in recent years we hear all this talk about their truth, like you just said, and it's an intriguing question. Is there an existing truth, or is truth largely opinion? But we're not going to get into that. We're going to go. We're going to get back to why did we get into this, and I'll go ahead and begin. Whenever I talk about that question, I have to remember my dad, Frank Adams, who was a mail carrier, and he carried mail during that early period of time when African Americans were just, I got to tell this story too. My in-law, well, my dad's close friend who became an in-law in the family, when we would have family gatherings, he would talk about carrying the mail in an all-white area during that time when African Americans got into it. And the punchline of the story was, "Linda, come to the door. There's a black man bringing our mail." So that brings me to my dad. I would come home from school. I'm telling why I got into this business. I'd come home from school. My dad faithfully read the Dallas Morning News, and he would be sitting there having come home from carrying the mail, and he'd lay the paper down and I would look at it. I did not see people in that newspaper at that period of time with me growing up in the 50s, 40s, 50s, or 60s. Yeah. But I didn't see people who looked like me. I did not see people who looked like the folk in my church. I did not see people who looked like my teachers at school. I didn't see my neighbors. I didn't see the store owner on the corner where I lived. And that struck me. I went on to elementary school and fell in love with books after my school librarian, Merlene Johnson Pitts, introduced me to the book Robinson Crusoe, an adventure, an intriguing adventure, and it even talked about people who did look like me, part of the plot did. And I got intrigued by the power of words and how you can visualize scenes, and I would be in my bedroom, but yet I could be on a desert island. I could be in my bedroom, but yet I could be skating on the streets of New York. I could be in my bedroom, but yet I could be flying up as an astronaut in space, and that captured me. And so as I continued to read, many people in my neighborhood would be out playing in the street, and I'd be in my bedroom with books and books and books, piles of books. But I was so fascinated by it, and that led to my career in journalism and me wanting to tell the story of the people that I knew. Fascinating things about them that I knew, experiences that were just not being told. And so that's how I got in it. How about you?
Well, I will answer that, but I first wanted to respond to the previous question about who decides what's news. At a major American newspaper that I worked at, I wondered why we didn't have more story. We had a lot of stories about the Philippines. We had one of the most extensive foreign correspondent networks of any news organization. But what about the people that lived in our city, and 1/4 of whom were Hispanic? And I asked, why can't we do more stories? And I was told, the editor, literally, I will never forget these words. Literally, the editor said to me, "Those people do not patronize our advertisers." So where is demos in that? Where is the First Amendment in that? And isn't what's happening with 1/4 of the city's population probably more relevant than what's happening in the Philippines, or at least as relevant? So in any case, so yes. And then another experience I had was that anything that happened to one of my editors who lived in the white northern suburbs was news. If her child got the measles, we did a big takeout on the measles. If the metropolitan editor who rode his bike to work ran over some glass on the street and his tires burst, we did a major front page story on broken glass. Broken glass. So yes, I think there is a certain lack of objectivity in the way news has been reported. Why did I get into this? I got into this for a lot of the same reasons that our moderator did. Like Norma, I also was an avid reader, and I wanted to find a job where I could read, write, and meet interesting people, and also, very importantly, make a difference. Yeah. And I thought that I could make a difference by finding out things that people didn't know about, that nobody was paying attention to. At the time I had this brilliant idea, I had no idea how many things weren't being told, but I soon found out.
Very good. How about you?
I was told to come to work at like 7, so every summer was kind of my reason for doing this. But I left to try to, burn my own path into the void. It didn't work out. Went out to California, had a movie type experience out there. When I mean movie type, I mean every bad thing you've seen about what can happen in California happened to me, including sitting next to the homeless guy saying, "So how is it to get food? Like, where do you go?" All of that. But I was always studying media. I went to school for film. I went to Arts Magnet. Even there, we had our own little side film, because they didn't have a film program at that time, but we would do storytelling. And I helped the English teacher start the paper there, just because that's something I knew how to do. When I got to college, all the journalist people knew my father, so I ended up basically being like a consultant for how they should run their paper, even though I didn't know anything about what they were doing. And it really hit me when, once again, like I said, almost homeless, living in California, having to make some decisions. Phone rings and it's Dad, like, "Do you want to come home and work for me again?" I was like, "I do, because I'd rather not be on the streets trying to figure out where I'm going to eat." Yeah, I know. So I came home, and the light bulb moment for me was that I still want to make movies, obviously, but there's this conversation that's been going on since I was a child for Black folk about we don't have this and we don't have that. One of those things was movies. We don't have a control of the movies that come out about us. We're always seeing slave movies, gangsters, pimps, and all that good stuff. And it just sort of...
Tyler Perry, he has...
We won't get all into that, but we will say, yes, that is true. And the main point was that I saw that my father's paper was like a foundation point for a larger media company. Okay. And then I sort of kind of clicked, and, it's like all TV movies started with news. CBS was formed because of a news station. The TV shows came to keep you involved in that part. But it was all basically to form this narrative that the station wanted. And I thought, well, if we could get to this point of pre-integration, where people almost had to go to this thing, which is not a great thing. But what it did was it said that all Black dollars funneled into something that they all supported, which meant that they could grow. and they could get bigger and they could be these big voices. If we could get back to that mentality for the younger folk, which is actually kind of easier because they're looking on, social and websites and mobile, and if you can grab them there and tell them this is where your money should go, you have the opportunity to create those TV stations, radio stations, studios, etc., that then is a true narrative of your community. It's true representation, not that weird representation where it's like, black folk are then written by and then produced by non-black people for non-black audiences. I call it the color purple theory. It's like, you sort of see that, but it's like Steven Spielberg wrote that he got snubbed for it, he directed it, got snubbed for it, but at the same time, it wasn't like black people didn't know these stories. Right. That's not the story we wanted to see. It's like, that's a story for someone else to figure out who you are. So it's a whole different thing that we haven't maybe even seen just yet. No, I won't get into my soapbox, but that was how I got back.
A big soapbox.
Yeah, I know. Big tide under me. But that was the reason why I got into it. I wanted to create that thing that could be the centralized hub for all black media and in a global society on a global scale. Because African media is also kind of janky, and I want to fix that too. But that's what happened for me.
Lord, what about you?
I needed a job, literally. At the time, I was working at the apparel mart on the rag business and traveling around the state, and I got tired of doing that. It's kind of hard to have a relationship if you're gone for 6 weeks and here for 6 weeks. You can't be part of a bowling league, you can't be part of a bridge tournament, you can't do any of that kind of stuff. And I was tired of being isolated from my own home, my own community. And the guy that lived next door to me was working for the Dallas Gay News, and the guy that had the Dallas Gay News was in Houston, and he had this little publication up here, and Don Ritz was the editor, and he was my neighbor, and his boyfriend was the advertising rep, who one Friday decided to take all the money when he got from the ad sales and left town. And they needed a sales rep. And I thought, well, I'll do this part-time until I can find a real job and go out, and do something that'll make my parents. And I got in it, and I did it for like 18 months, and I thought, this is easy. I like the people. It's interesting, and I could see that we were actually starting to make a difference, except for the gentleman that owned the paper. And as I told you, we would go out and take all these photographs and cover things and send them to Houston for it to be printed, and then when the paper would come up on Friday, it wouldn't be there. And we'd say, Henry, where is this? Where is this? He goes, nobody cares about softball. Nobody cares about the bowling league. Nobody cares about the Sunday school class. I said, we do, and we're putting this out. So then the paychecks bounced. And so, yeah, that's the bottom line. And so I got a call from a guy who had used to be a partner with that publisher in Houston and said, I think you guys are doing a great job up there, and I will help you. I said, how are you going to help us? He said, well, let's get together. So we drove to Houston, we talked to him, and so Don Ritz, who was the editor of the Dallas Gay News, and I and William Marbury in Houston decided that we would start the Dallas Voice. And we could do that because we had a float at the printer.
Yeah.
We
might pick the name Dallas Voice.
Bill Marbury picked that name because we argued and went back and forth about it. And Don wanted the word gay in there. But we had many distributors, places that we were putting the paper out with the Dallas Gay News, some people that would not put it. They would take Dallas Voice, but they would not take Dallas Gay News if it had gay on the front. They didn't want their customers to walk through with small children and read that on the way out of the restaurant or the movie theater or whatever it was. And so we picked Dallas Voice. We thought it was a voice. It was, and it was inoffensive. Honestly, that's how it came about. And we didn't know the logo. We didn't see anything until it came up on Friday because Bill did all that. It was just there. So I got into it because I needed a job, and then I found that I was good at it, and then we were making a difference. But the only reason that I could stay and make it work is that when we were thinking about leaving Dallas Gay News and starting out with our own paper, I thought, this is crazy. I just need to go do something else. I need to get something, a real job, you know, with a paycheck, with the letterhead on it and all that kind of stuff. And my roommate at the time said, no, you need to do this. Dallas needs a gay paper that needs a serious publication like you're trying to do, and I think you'll do a good job at it. I said, how am I going to do that? We have no money. He said, I will help you. And so Tim Barnes, he fed me, he paid my rent, he put gas in my car for 18 months.
What?
So that I could help build a publication in this town. And he died in 1994. And I paid him back the money, but I can never repay the debt that I owe to him. And that Dallas owes to him for helping us get started.
Now, before we go on, somebody keep me on track here with time. How are we doing? We're good. Okay.
You talk better environment. So,
Okay, we're going to get to Q&A. When you mentioned about those checks bouncing, and we're going to go to Doc Garza on this, you mentioned about those checks bouncing, and so that leads me to my next question, which is how do our publications, Doc Garza, manage with the limited advertising marketing compared to when you compare the advertising to major media publications and whose checks probably don't bounce, maybe. So how does that have an impact on us? And how do we manage that? Which is going to lead me to another question after we deal with that.
Well, a couple of things. First, historically, as many of you know, the Chicago Defender in Chicago and many similar newspapers, such as the Pittsburgh Courier, had to take a certain kind of ad, smaller ads for hair cream and whitening cream, and maybe even things that they didn't want to take ads for, and didn't get so many of those big Buick dealership ads that helped float the economics of the major mainstream papers. At the same time, this, of course, freed the newspapers to be critical, right? They were not beholden to major advertisers. So that was one issue. But fast forwarding to today, I would like to talk about my friend Mark Trahant, his role in Indian Country Today and turning around that publication. It's an online publication, and it's founded a great deal by individual supporters, much like PBS, foundation support. Their offices are now based at Arizona State University, and he's done a phenomenal job of finding a financial model through the nonprofit model, and I think we're seeing a lot of the so-called mainstream news organizations trying to develop and maintain a nonprofit model, and I think that is something that is very useful and has proven to work for Indian Country Today.
Money.
Yeah, sure. Money and the challenge of our advertising.
I get it.
Major media.
I get it. Yeah, I mean, it's always been a challenge, but I think that it's nuanced because it's not like, for example, the Dallas Morning News is not like, rolling in the dough just because they exist, And if you are the, big boss in the room, people kind of want to use you as their sounding board. So there is a level of, historically there's been a level of bias there, but I think in a modern sense for us, especially the black press specifically, it's retraining your own community to understand how to use you as this ecosystem. Our issue is I'll use the Black Chamber as an example. Right now, I think there are 500 or so paying members of the Black Chamber, which are all black-owned businesses. If each one of them paid me $100 a month, I go up 200% in my productivity. But if they don't know to do that, and those dollars that they give me are tax deductible. So in essence, them investing in their own community voice is an investment in their own business. Because not only does it promote them, it gives them a vehicle to invest in themselves by getting that money back at the end of the year. So they can basically double if they, diligent. If you put $100 a month, that next year you can give me $2,400 because you spent $1,200 that first year, you get it back, and now you're able to spend that because it's free money and your established budget. Over time, you create those marketing budgets using the tools of your own community. That was a trick that we had back in the day, but like I said, integration for us was the big, flashpoint. Yeah. It's when all those things that we now talk about kind of in a mainstream sense of black people's sense of understanding who they are, the juxtaposition to whiteness, all that stuff relates to a topic called self-hatred, which means that some black folk, when they had the opportunity to go into white spaces, definitely would abandon the black because they believe, just like the mainstream believe, everything black is bad. So I'll go get a new white dentist. I'll go buy the white paper. I'll go put my business, if I can, in their areas so that I can get those better dollars. That hurt a lot of businesses, but for the black press, and I'll say this, and you can quote me on it, there are two pillars in our community, the church and the press. Only one of those was required to tell you the truth. They chose the one that didn't. And so that now you're looking now, our black press are all suffering. All of the ones you can find, or so I don't care how big or old they are, but there are mega churches in every black community in the country. And then I would say if there's all this idealism about what the church is supposed to do, why does South Dallas have a church on every corner and there's crack on every other corner? If there's that much money coming in here, and it's that much about the support of the community, our business has never had the opportunity to fail its community because we are obligated to serve them. And that's why I say that the challenge is, yes, we have these advertising dollars, but it's also the mentality of each community because we're all nuanced. Our challenge is getting black folk to realize that they have their own power. They keep giving it away because of some inadequacy that doesn't exist.
I have to quote Nelson Mandela. He once said, the issue is not that we don't have power, talking about his people in Africa. He says, the issue is not that we don't have power. The issue is that we have power far beyond what we realize or use. He said, that's the issue. Well, go ahead.
Well, of course, money is always a challenge at a small newspaper, and especially challenging for us in the beginning when probably half of your readership will not even acknowledge that they read you. And I saw that's a whole different story. And I remember when I was a young gay man and coming out, and there was a guide called This Week in Texas, and everybody picked it up on the way out of the bar on a Friday or Saturday night, and you put it in the trunk of your car so nobody would find it in the front seat or the back seat or something. You hid it. And we had that with the Dallas Gay News, and we had that with the Dallas Voice. Much of our readership at the time was closeted, and they wouldn't acknowledge closeted at work, or closeted with family, or closeted with their friends, somebody, and they wouldn't acknowledge. So how do you go out and sell something when half of your readership is not even going to acknowledge that they read it? And there was several studies about the gay community said that they were more educated, and that they were generally two incomes in a family, no kids, that sort of thing. But there was no documentation, there was no research about it. So 12 newspapers, the biggest 12 newspapers in the country, we got together and we did the first demographic study on what our readership was. This was not a study of the gay community. We were not the gay community, we were our readership. We could only tell you what the demographics were, the income, the age, and the gender of the people who read our publication on Friday and were willing to fill out that survey and send it in. And that helped us. That helped us to market ourselves. It was done by Simmons, so it was a reliable party, and that helped us immensely for the dollars to start running in when we could verify who was reading us and go back to advertisers and give them what they wanted. Was how do we craft our message to your readership? It made a big difference for us. The other thing that made a big difference for us is that my business partner at the time that we started, Don Ritz, was tied with a nickel. And he said, we are a business. This is not a This is not a nonprofit. This is not a charity. This is a business. We're going to build this as an institution to survive. And I give him a lot of credit of running it like a business and not. I see some publications around the country, many gay publications that have started by an activist who starts from the heart. And their heart is in the right place, but they're not business people. Don was a hard-headed business person, and I give him a lot of credit for our success and our longevity.
Just to speak on that point, I want to tell a story. A while ago when I was basically just selling for the paper, we went out to Cedar Hill, and you know Cedar Hill's got a lot of black folk out there. The guy's business was in athletic healing, so healing. So he did some kind of program where he helped athletes heal from whatever. And I mean it extended into elderly care and that kind of, but it was predominantly for athletes. He's black. Just all those details keep in your mind. So I'm sitting here going him the hardest pitch ever, like this is going to help you because we are all around this, thinking he's black, his business is black, Cedar Hill's predominantly black. This is going to be great for you because we can get you in this message. And I could see in his face as I'm talking, and I'm giving him this is when we were like really kicking with the digital, so I'm giving him all these numbers and like it's going to go all these places. And I can see him in his face doing that like, I'm waiting for you to stop talking kind of look, like, And then he sort of kind of casually said to me with a very soft voice, like, well, what would people think if I put like a big ad in there? And I was like, what does that even mean? Like, they like it? He said, well, I don't want anybody to see it and just assume that I'm, like a black business. And I said these words to him, like, I'll never forget. I said back to him, so you, a black dude, in Cedar Hill, predominantly black neighborhood, doing what you do for black people, don't want anyone to know you're black? Wow. I said that to him. He said, no, I just don't want anybody to be put off by it. Wow. I just, folded up my stuff and said, you know what, I'll send you a media kit. I never talked to him again. But it was that thing of there are people even in our community who are not feared of getting outed, but just in fear of maybe someone will recognize me as a black person and that'll change how they see me.
What?
And that was another challenge of doing business in your own community, because like some people don't want to give you their dollar because they may have a few more white faces coming in their business and they don't want to be seen as a black business.
Wow, very interesting. Okay, we're going to have one more question and then we're going to do wrap up and then Q&A. So the question is, and then be thinking of what point you want to close with. Social media. Social media. Now, again, we're quote unquote the alternatives. And then along comes social media. Now listen, smaller publications are not the only ones being impacted. So Jesse Jackson, I think, it's always quoted as saying, when all of America catches a cold, black people catch pneumonia. So if all media is struggling with how to survive with social media, blogs and podcasts and digital publications and all of the above, how does that impact quote unquote alternatives that we're going to stop using that term?
Well, I think, first of all, the one that I think the form of social media that most journalists use is Twitter. When I started doing research about 10 years ago, was something like only 20% of all Americans use Twitter at any time, even once. And now, 10 years later, it's something like 35%. So when you stop to think about that, who's really on, for example, Twitter, and how relevant is it? Well, as it turns out that people of color tend to be on social media, especially Twitter, a lot more than others. So I think certainly in terms of being like a tip sheet, like as you recall with my first slide on the presentation with the Mexican newsboy waving the newspaper, read all about it. I think that Twitter is kind of that messenger, especially for many communities of color. But I think it's important to recognize with all of the hoopla over social media,
it's really, talk about marginal. Twitter especially is fairly marginal as far as American media consumption. 35% use it to some degree, and most people don't even use it every day. Interesting. We may use it every day because we're in the media, but I think we need to ask critical questions and kind of blow through some of this social media hype.
Interesting. 35%.
Actually, just echo that because I'm a comic book reader, for those that couldn't tell. And I'm sure you've heard of Marvel movies by this point, maybe if you haven't seen them, but a lot of those companies gauge their popularity or what, they're going to put the movie out based on Twitter. And for comic book fans, they were always talking about what comic book fans were looking for and all this stuff. And as a comic book reader, you know that there are no comic book fans on Twitter. There just aren't. That's not where they engage. And so this came out, I think it was a journalist, I forget who it was, but it was somebody who worked out of one of the LA, I think it was the Times, just did a survey of like how many people who read comic books are actually on Twitter, and it was like 2%. And they were basing their marketing based on the comic book readers on Twitter. And so that's just one thing. But I will say this, though. Social media will change a bunch of things. It's going to make a lot of people rich, a lot of people famous. But to me, it's still just a tool that is, it's the big shiny tool. Everybody likes it. But its holes are very obvious. And as we get more and more into ingraining it into society, those holes become the definitions of it. And black people do use social media, in some ungodly number more than most other groups. But what we found is that most of those folk are searching for some kernel of truth, something they can actually verify. There's a lot of things shared, and I'll give an example of when Kobe Bryant died. TMZ, of course, had the first story. And I remember seeing it and going, I'll wait. And a lot of other people going, did you see this? And it's like, yeah, but nobody was like, Kobe Bryant's dead until usually, like, I think it was the, whatever the major daily in LA was, reported it. Because it had the time, who was there, it had the stuff that made it so, like, this can be proven. They had the right pictures, et cetera, et cetera. And also, just like on TV today, anything that you hear that is a news point, you will hear from usually a community journalist. Someone else is usually echoing that. If Rachel Maddow tells you something, she usually goes, according to the Boston Globe. It's like, and the same thing is on Twitter. Someone puts something, I always tell people, you don't get your news from Twitter, you get it from someone who is a journalist probably saying something on Twitter because that's where your eyeballs are. But Twitter is an imaginary place, Facebook's an imaginary place, none of these places are real, and our children do think they are real, but they're not real. The only thing that's, TikTok is not real, it's nothing. You're still looking at a screen and somebody is giving you their presentation of news or information. The saddest thing is that those things are entertainment. And entertainment is a lot more popular than news. Hence, like I said, the TV network started with news but gave you sitcoms to keep you entertained. Hopefully the entertainment is educational, but but that's what social media is. It's entertainment. It's another form of entertainment that has co-opted information.
You're opening my eyes.
But that's all it is. And I know, be worried about it, keep your eye on it, but never think that it's real. And I'll give this last story and pass the mic. There was a young man who worked for us. He was on tour. We had something going on with the Cowboys or something like that. One of their players had basically tapped some of our sports people to be like his entourage, take pictures, write stories, etc. Said he'd pay them, didn't. But he had done an appearance with them somewhere, and one of the guy that worked for us basically put it out like we're rearing up for this marketing push. Guy changes his mind the midnight that night, puts out on Twitter, I don't know this dude, he's lying. His Twitter blows up. People are making jokes, they've got insults, he's getting DM'd, and he's now like literally in tears. He comes to me and my cohort who are, I guess, old millennials, and he was trying to explain his situation, and it took, I swear to you people, it took everything, every ounce of strength in me not to laugh in this young man's face. Because he was explaining to me how he had to rebuild his Twitter account because he had been insulted by this real person, and now people think he's this thing. And I asked him, well, why don't you just turn it off? And he looked at me like I asked him to cut off his right arm. He was like, what are you talking about? You know how long it took me to do that? You know how much time I spent on this? And I go, I took his phone and literally turned off his notifications, and I was like, that's it. And he and put it back, and he took the abuse, he took the disrespect, he took all of it, and didn't understand how we were just, well, push the phone to the side, man, it's this phone. because it was his life. That was his reality. They shaped his reality because that happened, and that was who he was. And I to this day, his name was Boom, by the way. I see Boom every now and again. I go, man, how you doing? Well, I'm good, you know, and it's like he's still on social, trying to create this persona that people will love, and that will give him the kind of attention, the kind of respect he thinks comes from that. And he is 27 now. He was like 22 at the time. And I remember then thinking, oh, we're lost. Oh, like this kid thinks Twitter is real. And and that's kind of what it is. So.
Right. Or
As an aging baby boomer, next to this young millennial, and somebody who said, the first time somebody told me, someday you're going to get everything on your phone. Your news is going to be on your phone. Your stock quotes going to be on your phone. You're going to get, oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. Yeah, you've been watching the Jetsons. So I'm not a very good person to ask about the impact of social media.
okay, I agree.
That was the time. It is a tool. Patrick is absolutely right about that. It is a tool, and you need to be skilled with your tools if you're going to succeed. And that was about the point in my life I decided that it was changing, and I was not the person to take it to the place that it needed to go. And I did believe in the institution. I believed in the work, and I knew I had enough self-awareness in myself that I was not going to use that tool the way it needed to be used. Now I can put up my cat pictures. Here's my cat. But as far as doing something meaningful, that was not for me. So it was time for me to go, and that's when I left, because I knew it was changing, and I was not going to invest the time, the energy that it deserved, and so I bowed out. I want to go.
We're going to give your close stuff. I'm here to go back this way.
Okay, in wrapping up, I want to go back to something Patrick said about his potential advertiser not wanting to be identified as a black man. I have to give thanks and kudos to our advertisers who were just as courageous as we were.
Yes, that's a whole other story.
And I remember the first time that I walked in and I got a call from a dentist. And he said, I'm thinking about running an ad in your newspaper. And I said, really? I said, I'll come meet you. And we had a few tradespeople, a painter, people that laid carpet or lawn people or stuff like that, but we did not have a degreed professional with letters behind their name running ads in our paper. And this guy called and he was a dentist. And I went in, and his name was Michael Milham, and he had a dentistry in Highland Park. And I sat down with his mother, who was his office manager, and she said, now where would my ad go? And I said, well, where do you want it to go? She said, I think this is a nice spot at the top of page 3. And I said, that's a real good spot. And she stayed there for 10 years. Wow. And every one of his friends told him he was going to destroy his dental practice if he ran an ad in a gay paper.
Like that.
And he said, I think it'll be okay. And he ran his ad. And then one week, the morning news and the business section did a profile on the Dallas Voice and the coming of age of gay media and the Voice, and about the changing face.
Like what period of time?
This would have been like in the early 90s, probably, something like that.
Okay.
And in the beginning, it said Garland Ford sells Fords, and they sell them to the gay community. And we had been for 2 or 3 weeks running full-page ads on the inside cover from Garland Ford. That piece on Sunday came out with Garland Ford at the beginning of it, and on Monday afternoon I got a call from my brother, said, you need to turn into this radio station. So I turned in, and it was a country and western station, and there were 2 DJs making cracks about Fag Ford.
Whoa.
And I guess all the fags are going to be driving Fords now, and they've destroyed Ford and all of that. And then the next Sunday, there was a church down the street from that Ford dealership who decided that they would march up and down in front and protest. And they stuck it out. And they continued to advertise with us. So there's people that stood behind me and believed in what we were doing and weren't going to take the hate speech and the pressure and stood with us. And I have to thank them. Otherwise, we would have made it.
Yes. Like, that's a powerful story.
So wrapping it up.
We're wrapping.
I mean, I feel like this crowd kind of feels us. But as a wrap-up, I would say and urge everybody that if you are not social media savvy, that's perfectly fine. You can like us on anything. You can like us on all the platforms that you like. Tell your grandkids or your cousins, whatever, like us on whatever. We're on TikTok too. Believe that. But also, you can support your local press no matter who it is. In a local sense, your specific community, your ethnic group. There's a voice for you out there. And although it is our job to find you, we do appreciate you looking for us because it's a lot easier to find you when you're looking. And so if you're just looking to get out there and support things and to tell people there's dissenting voices and opinions, those things do exist, and it's a simple Google search, to find us. And, always going to be in the community because that's where we have to be, and that's typically where we are. And I will say as a hopeful moment, a lot of us have been segregated, whether it be here in Dallas, it was the Mexican community, the black community, gay community, women, Asians, etc. Those things don't have to necessarily happen because we're all struggling for the same thing, which is to be seen and heard. And if we raise up together, it's a lot easier. So we just had a meeting. Were you there? Sure, I was there. I didn't know if the Korean chamber. Yeah. So the Black Chamber and the Korean Chamber just decided to have a meeting about unity. And it's really funny because it wasn't huge, it wasn't this big fanfare, and that's how I knew it was serious. Because it's no, we're going to get the people who are going to do the work in the room, and we were invited because the chamber recognizes us as someone that can help them message to the community what we're doing. This ain't for show. This is something that's going to build bridges, not build fences. And I think that mentality, especially for local media, marginalized groups, as we said, have recognized that we're all marginalized in different ways, but we're all marginalized. We're all trying to get to the point where we can sit up and go, we're all good. And that is what I'm really hopeful in because I've seen a lot of the younger folk willing to make those kind of connections. We'll cover, we cover the Latin American community because our friends are in those communities. And they are activists too, so we're doing this cross-pollination of cultural exchange, which has been there, but it's been strained under whatever, the Oak Cliff, South Dallas divide, the 1960s. There's always something that is that thing that divides. Now it's tear all that down. And that's what I will say is a good thing about social media. It allows for a lot of transparency, a lot of fact checking can happen, and fact checkers love to be on your posts. Trust me.
Dr. Garza, then I'll give my very brief wrap.
So I would like to go back to the subtitle of my presentation about nothing alternative about alternative newspapers. And one of the reasons I say that is I think the historical perspective here is so important. When we think about the first newspapers in the British colonies here in the United States, they were advocacy newspapers, and they advocated for the overthrow of colonial rule by England. And the press has always been advocacy in that sense. One of the attacks or criticisms of the so-called alternative media, the black press, the Latin American press, gay press, etc., has been, well, those people have a point of view. They're advocates. But let's remember that, even moving forward, when we look at the formation of the Dallas Morning News, these people were advocates. They were that's not necessarily a bad thing. Founder of the paper was an advocate for mosquito abatement. For trash cans, for public sanitation, but also for, let's not let them off the hook, for keeping the black community where the black community was supposed to be and not mixing with the white community. And this was true for suppression of the labor movement. Pro-business in the sense that, in a short-sighted way, right? Because you have to have good workers if you want to have a good business. Amon Carter, where the West begins, right?
imagining a community that was not wedded into the image of the Confederacy, but into something more romantic, right? All of these things, civic engineering, all of that is advocacy. So what has happened is that historically we've looked at the mainstream press, let's say what for what it was, the white male press, as somehow objective, as somehow neutral, as somehow non-advocacy, when in fact all along, of course, it has been. So I think one of the reasons why I am so opposed to the concept of alternative is because the criticism of the gay press is, oh, well, they're advocating for this. The black press, well, they're advocating for civil rights, et cetera, et cetera. So let's remember that the press is the press, and it's part of our First Amendment. We need it to be strong and vibrant in order to form this more perfect union that we are still struggling to build. And I echo exactly what Patrick said, that I hope that you will support your local news.
My wrap up, and let me just do one clarification as I lead into my very brief wrap up. When I was introduced, I think it was said I am the founder, but I am one of 44 founders of the National Association of Black Journalists. And I will end with this quote that is quoted just frequently among our group, and my deepest research on it is that it goes back to being an African proverb, and it says, as my closing remark, until the lion tells his own story, tales of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. And so therefore, we're here to tell our own story from our own perspective, and that's the way it is. Let's say thank you to our panelists.
I think we all need to take Dr. Garza's media literacy class. I think we will all start with that. I want to thank you for all being here this evening. You have been an excellent panel. I truly have learned a lot tonight, so thank you for doing this. The purpose of this collaboration with Deep Vellum Books and the Dallas Historical Society was to work through issues where there was a through line to history. What went on 200 years ago and how things are still going on today, and what is that through line? And it is your press that is a through line of history. And so I urge all of you, when you are out there in the community, I once asked a prominent businesswoman when I was on the council, and there was a controversial issue before the council. And she made a point, and I said, do you ever pick up the Dallas Weekly or anything like that to see what other people are saying? What do you think the black community has said about this issue? And she'd never picked one up. Pick up a Dallas Voice, pick up a Dallas Weekly, and find out what different voices are saying. I encourage you to do that. Know your history, know your press. Have a good evening. Thank you.